that is unique to this subculture?
Bogey?
Bogey. What does it mean? Enemy target. I'm glad you said you didn't know what it meant, but it's kind of good that those guys on those airplanes know what the bogey means. And they know immediately. More. There was a ton of it.
They all have their own call names?
They have their own call names. They get those, they apply for them in flight school. Each one has a unique name. It is approved by the Navy for those candidates, and that name stays with them forever because it's never reused. So Maverick got his name, and this is, of course, the fictional part where he's the renegade and all that kind of stuff. More.
Mustang and Ghost Rider.
Mustang and Ghost Rider. And that's referring to the different flights. More?
Trailer?
Trailer? Okay, when I first heard that years ago, I immediately thought of the trailer that was parked in my yard. The travel trailer.
Isn't it somebody just like riding their sonar wave or whatever, so they're invisible?
Excellent way of saying it. It means the two planes are lined up like this. So on the radar, which is aimed at the front airplane, cannot discern the one that is behind it. And then deliberately they brought them out in this fashion so that we could see, and eventually Maverick and Cougar could see that there were two airplanes. Now, why is that important to know whether there is a trailer?
That's twice the threat if there's two.
There's two against two.
And it's usually probably something more serious if it's just like both.
It's 2 against 2, which is not as good odds as 2 against 1. Because if they have two planes and there's one enemy plane, then they could go after it. All right. I'm looking at my, and you heard the word, when the commander, the man with the hat, said to the officer to his right, something like, do we have visitors today? And the man to the left, or to his right, said, negative, sir. Why did he use the word negative instead of no? Why do you think they did that, or do that?
Because it's harder to mistake the word negative for something else?
Exactly. No has two spellings in English. K-N-O-W and N-O are pronounced exactly the same way, but mean something entirely different. All right, let's take a break and come back at 5 minutes, let's see, 34. Come back at 5 minutes to 2, and we will continue with this and then go to The Godfather and do a bunch of other stuff. Thanks. Thanks, Deb, and I'll repeat it. My microphone was not turned on, and Erin was just running in here to tell me that. I want to skip forward and get to the topic of diagnosing organizational culture so that I'm sure that we'll have time for some commentary on the Harvey and Allard readings and the review I want to give you for the examination. The portions that I'm skipping over are the different perspectives on organizational culture, and you will see that there are three major ones which act again as camera lenses and cause us to perceive organizational cultures in different ways. This stuff is important. It will be on the examination. I'm simply don't feel that we need to go through it in great detail in here today. In cultural symbolism, which we actually saw in the Top Gun scene, when going into a culture for the first time, in an organization culture or a culture of a country, the symbolic aspects of the culture hit you in the face, I think, right away. However, the symbols come in three different forms. One has to do with action and the behaviors that people take. Others are verbal, which are based on stories and references. And others are material symbols, which are the physical aspects of the organization's culture. Erin, don't put that on yet, please, because I'm not quite there. Thank you. Then cultures serve certain functions for organizations. Pay attention to that. And also cultures can create dysfunctions. For example, An organization's culture may aim it in a specific direction when it actually needs to shift. So that we say, the phrase we use is culture constrains strategy. It can prevent a necessary strategic focus and strategic change in what the organization needs to do. Now that brings us to diagnosing organizational culture. And this is on screen, you can put this on now, Aaron, is a rendition, not quite the way it's done in the text, which is table 4.1 on page 80, is how do we go about diagnosing an organizational culture? This is the E exercise for this module. And the few that I received up through this morning, and by the way, I was asked this last week, the E exercises are due by Sunday at the end of the module. You don't have to do them by class time. I don't expect you to do that. And if I want us to do them in here because I think it's, ties directly to the discussion, I'll bring them in myself and then you can post them. But here's what we do. We first of all divide our viewing of an organization's culture into two parts. One are the visible parts and the other are the invisible parts, or artifacts as I say here. The visible stuff is what we can see. The three items arrayed across the top: physical characteristics, behavior, and public documents. In public documents is anything you can get that is official for the organization, including stuff from its website. But there's also so-called unofficial public documents, which could be commentary about the organization made by some other source, such as a labor union, a consumers group, and so on. But all of that information counts, but you have to exercise enormous care in processing this so that you know what is valid. And when you see contradictions in statements in public documents, you have to track down the contradiction. Physical characteristics, going over to the left, is everything that we could see, such as the dance studio, the store, and the different things that were commented on in here. Everything counts in physical characteristics on the diagnosis worksheet. I give you examples: architecture, office layout, decor, and attire. How do people dress? What does the place look like? What is the formal architecture? You may or may not know that one of the architectural sort of rules for the University of New Mexico architecture is to hold on to its original southwestern theme. I think we lost it a little bit with the building that's over near Central that's got, let's see, it's got fine arts in it, I think, in the fine arts library. So it doesn't quite have all the stuff that exists elsewhere. Are you familiar with Hajin Hall, by the way? And a couple of people are saying no. That is the first University of New Mexico building in 1880-something. And when that building was built, that architecture was picked deliberately. And at that time, there was nothing between downtown and here. It was all just open land. And I never saw that, but I actually have the wife of my senior professor, who both are still alive, was an undergraduate student here in the 1930s. And her hobby was to take her rifle and go out and shoot rabbits here on campus, because this was just wild country around it. But Hajin Hall has an architecture that's been preserved to render it a symbol of the founding of the University of New Mexico. If you've never seen it, if you can take the time, it's over in the the southwestern corner of the campus. It is a distinctive building. You cannot miss it. It's really beautiful on the outside and fully restored outside and inside. So I offer that as simply an example. Then you want to get to behavior. How do people behave? And that's something we were talking about early on. Now comes the hard part, and that is, what are the values? And you may notice that you were struggling